Hey everybody, welcome to Rust Belt Startup. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and this is a podcast full of long-form conversations with artists, entrepreneurs, educators, people that are living unconventional lives in unconventional locations. And today, I've got a conversation with Kristin Fahy. Kristin is someone who is living unconventional lives in multiple locations. So whether she's in Florida, upstate New York, whether she's traveling overseas, she's someone that I wanted to talk to about professionaling, and that's her verb. She's the author of Profressionaling Is Hard, 22 Lessons That Make It a Little Bit Easier. She also has the Profressionaling podcast, and is just a cool person. So in this conversation, we talk about her career trajectory and how she started in public health and then moved into the biotech firm and now runs her own firm, Impetus Health. We'll talk about how do you position yourself for a career that might not even exist yet. What are some of those professionaling lessons and skills that you should be developing, those muscles that you should be flexing to position yourself to build the career and the life that you want. And we also will get into a little bit of why she decided to do a book, how she held herself accountable to write that, and actually got it out into the world. So really grateful for Kristin's time. She was just in town and then is going to be out of town again. So thank you for making time while you're in the area. And if you want to learn more about Kristin, you can visit kristinfahy.com. The links are in the show notes. And you can check out Profressionaling Is Hard on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle or paperback. And it's graduation season. Might be a great gift for those new grads as they think about what the heck are they going to do in the fall. Okay, so what's happening? I am loving getting back into doing these pods on a regular basis. So thank you guys for tuning in and subscribing. I do want to mention right up front of the show that I'm doing the email newsletter thing, and I'm trying to make it really good. Very short, super high impact. So if you're at all interested, go to rustbeltstartup.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get new podcast notifications, but also just some of the stuff that I think is worth your time reading or watching, and I'll even summarize some of it for you. I've been speaking to a lot of groups of young people this week, and one of the questions that has come up multiple times this week, which I'm kind of surprised about, is do I have a mantra or do I have a philosophy or something I tell myself that kind of keeps me on track or recenters me? And I think the short answer is that I don't, but I have shared with several individuals this week that, there are a few questions that I ask myself that I think maybe function in a similar fashion that helps me to, I think, make better decisions, maybe be a little bit bold, and also keep me oriented towards, my North Star. And so a couple of those questions that I ask myself, the first is, well, what's the worst that can happen? And I genuinely try to visualize or think about what might those negative outcomes be from an action or a decision that I got to make, an email that I really should send, a sales pitch that I should send, but I'm too afraid to do that. Like, what's the worst that can happen? No one is going to receive that email, track me down, and figure out where I live and punch me in the face, knock on the door and punch me in the face. Like, that's not going to happen. The worst that can happen in a lot of situations when you're dealing with sales or trying to create opportunity is nothing. Like, the worst that can happen is they're just not going to respond to your email. So I try to ask myself that a lot. What's the worst that can happen when I'm afraid of taking that step or doing something? What is the worst that can happen? And the second is something that I stole from a blog post that Tim Ferriss put out years ago, and I can't remember the name of the blog post. I'll try to link it up in the show notes. It might be like 13 useful questions or 16 useful questions. Anyway, one of those questions is, what does this look like if it were easy? I think about this all the time when I'm trying to launch a podcast, when I'm trying to build a line of business. What does this look like if it were easy? And when I think about that, I'm trying to think principally about efficiency, positive outcome. Like, running a podcast, what does it look like if it were easy? It would look like that I have a team that is helping me to book guests. It would be that it has a small audience of people that deeply care about the subject matter and the guests that I'm speaking with. It looks like something that I can do every 2 weeks, and it looks like a podcast where people are seeking me out as much as I'm seeking out guests. What does it look like if it were easy when you're thinking about a job or starting a company? It doesn't mean you're going to get there overnight. It doesn't mean that you're ever going to get there, but it serves as a framework for me to constantly iterate, try new things, stay curious, and create efficiencies where I want to eventually spend the time on any given task, project, job, doing the things that are most creative or most fun for me, kind of limiting all of the stuff that I don't want to do. What are the systems that I can put in place where I can do less of those things? I think about what does it look like if it were easy all the time. So that might be useful to you, but that's what I've been telling people. What's the worst can happen? What does it look like if it were easy? Okay, let's get to my conversation with Kristin Fahy. Into it. So, first of all, thanks for coming up from Newark. Well, Florida via Newark. So why Newark versus like LaGuardia or Syracuse? What's about Newark?
It was a direct flight, and I was originally going to spend the night and see one of my best friends in the city. Yeah, but
cool.
That's
cool.
Okay.
And so we've gone from 70 degrees to 50 and rainy, as you might be hearing.
Nothing like home.
Nothing like home. Well, let's start there. Let's. I don't want to talk about where you grew up, what sports teams you were on, but I do want to talk about. Let's just start with. No, I'm not going to start with sense of home. What I want to start with is one of the reasons we're talking is you've got a book, Profressionaling Is Hard, and I love the verb, professionaling. What I wanted to kind of unpack right now is you are a consultant for consultants for biotech,
yes.
kind of, right?
Yeah. How
did you come upon this career trajectory of like first biotech and then like, I'm kind of a consultant, but now you're going very meta here, and I'm going to be a consultant for consultants. Can you just give us a little bit of the journey here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like many people probably. I feel like it's a career that was almost on accident in some ways. So going all the way back, when I was in college, I was avoiding the big science classes, and I took epidemiology, and I completely fell in love.
What is epidemiology?
It's the study of disease.
Okay.
So I feel like not many people knew that word until the pandemic, and now we're all like, oh, epidemiology, get it. This is how diseases spread. And it just totally blew my mind open and started me on this path of, I was a business student, but then when you applied things to health or healthcare, everything made more sense. I got better grades. It just clicked in for me that like helping people help themselves or helping people be more healthy was what I was passionate about. So it started me down this road. I got a master's in public health, and then my whole career has really been in and around the healthcare industry, because it just also, to me, very early on was there are so many big gnarly problems and very few clear-cut answers, and that just seems like I love solving problems, and it seems like a lot of job security, both in solving big gnarly problems or attempting to chip away at them, and people's health. People are never, unfortunately, going to stop needing healthcare. So, for those two reasons, it seemed like an interesting career path.
That's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the host was giving young people kind of career advice that where a lot of kids want to go into arts and acting and follow your passion and all. We'll talk about that, but they said, look, the unemployment rate for actors is 98 point something percent, and I can't remember all of the actual numbers, but it was a couple 100,000 people, maybe. I'm going to get this wrong, in the Screen Actors Guild, but it was like 85% of the members of the Screen Actors Guild make under $20,000 a year.
Wow.
And so it's like, if you're thinking about, to your point of, hey, I'm going to go into this thing, is there opportunity, and is there maybe a fair degree a barrier to entry? So then make the jump from epidemiology to biotech.
So I worked actually at Excelis for a little while in reimbursement, because that's sort of like how the money works piece of it was always interesting to me. And then did a couple other things, but found myself working for an amazing woman who had left Boston Scientific, and she was a consultant and had her own practice. And that was sort of the gateway into, okay, how do you bring devices, drugs, biopharma products, how do you bring them to market, and what does that look like? And how do you go from great, there's a concept or there's something that might be promising, all the way through this big, complicated system.
It's a decade process, right?
Oh, yeah.
Probably. You said you got a degree in public health. Was it a master's in public health?
Yep, master's in
public health. Okay, cool. So that was your kind of ticket into this field, and I just want to spit back at you what you're telling me is that you are working for a consultant that was in biotech.
Yep, the first one, she was more in medical devices, but it's, those medical devices, pharma, biopharmaceuticals are all kind of similar in diagnostics. So it's, what are those products that you're using within the greater healthcare system?
Can you talk about some of what those products were like? Were they drugs? Were they like metallic hips? What were they?
Yep, some of them were, like an implantable. So she, as I said, was at Boston Scientific. So that was a lot of stents. You're actually putting them in a human.
Yeah.
So that's more the medical device side. And then, on the pharma and biopharma side, it's, we have this drug and how do we study it in people and what do those trials look like? Is there anything like that out there in all of these cases? A predicate device. So does something like this exist, or is this completely novel and new and you have to figure out your own pathway?
Okay. So. How long were you doing that?
So I worked sort of in that for a little while, probably a year or two, and then switched into market research.
Okay.
So all in the same space and working for financial clients as well, just to kind of same thing, understand what's the market opportunity and what does this look like? Who are, the patients, who are the providers, and is this actually going to be a valuable thing when it comes on the market? And talking to payers too, so the Exceluses or the health insurance companies to say, is there a hole here? Is there a space, or is this a well-addressed market? And if this came on the market, would you value it? Would you pay for it and reimburse it? So kind of soup to nuts, really trying to understand that whole pathway of, great, you've got this product, but who are the patients? Who would prescribe it? Who would distribute it? How do you get it covered by a payer? And all of the conditions.
Did you like it?
Oh, it's fascinating.
Okay. That's different from did you like it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, I did. Cool. Yeah, different parts of it. I mean, certainly, being a consultant and working with these companies, there's so much passion in people who dedicate their lives to trying to help better people or to help patients. And sometimes there are stories where someone in their family, or it's a very near and dear, someone's been affected by this and they really want to have a big impact. And, so that part of it feels great, knowing that you're a small piece of that. And, solving big problems is, for me, I like that. I love that. And as I said earlier, there's sort of, there's not always a clean answer, and yet you're chipping away at something, and that progress, that ability to be creative in how you solve something, or, can have a slight touch or a slight impact on it is meaningful.
So there's a point where you then decide, I'm going to change my, relationship with the industry, and you're going to go out on your own. So you started Impetus Health.
Yep.
And you're a solopreneur with an army of experts at your disposal. But can you tell me, like, what was there a point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna make this transition, or is there something that happened where you're like, I see opportunity that I can attack here that I can't attack here?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of an evolution. So I had been, market research, consulting. I had worked for a couple companies, but, the last 4 years of being more a consultant who worked for someone, I spent trying to replace myself with software. So, which was fascinating, right? Like how...
Why do that instead of just hold on for dear life to your career?
I think it's your relationship to change and your relationship to technology. And I've always kind of firmly believed that the more you can lean into technology, like how can I leverage or use this so I can free myself up to do higher level or more creative thinking instead of feeling threatened by it. And so, my boss at the time and I saw this opportunity to say, there has to be a better, more efficient way to do what we're doing that takes months right now. There's got to be a better way. And so trying to solve for that was fascinating. And being, with a development team who were amazing and getting to try to figure out how to solve for that was great. And so after leaving there, it sort of naturally has come about that all of these things I joke sometimes that like efficiency is my first love because I'm always thinking about like the sequence I do things in or how can I be more efficient. And so things that I was doing within consulting organizations, both for that group, but the clients as well, was all about, well, how do you make this a repeatable thing so that you can either monetize it or even if no one sees this, you're just doing it more efficiently and it, again, frees you up. And so since I've been independent again or working, for Impetus again, it's really just been talking to people. And a lot of my friends also have small consulting groups and hearing them talk about the problems they're trying to solve or the inefficiencies. And so it's just sort of organically come about that I'm helping them solve some of those problems. And whether that's through, oh, hey, you're actually sitting on a bunch of data that could be really interesting.
Yeah.
How do we turn that into a product? Or, hey, there's this process or this framework. You're doing this time and again as a deliverable. Let's find a better way of doing that. So it's just helping them realize opportunity that they're sitting on, but probably just so busy executing, they might not be monetizing or scaling to the next level.
I guess that's okay. That's a good point, because what I'm wondering is is there a muscle that you have trained or flexed that allows you to kind of see what others don't see? Or like, when you're talking about efficiency or change or relationship to technology, sometimes I feel like in some ways that's why consultants exist, is because they can just see something that it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle sometimes, right? So is that kind of a superpower of yours, or how do you develop that muscle?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's listening and just what's said and what's unsaid. And that too comes from years in client services is, well, what are you telling me when you're talking about your business or the problem that brought you here? Or even, again, just people talking sort of on the side with what they're struggling with or where they want to go. I think it is bridging that gap to say like, oh, but there's this whole thing that you might not be seeing that I'm outside of the bottle, as you said, and it's much easier for me to quickly see it. And
So then how do you make people receptive to that change? Because change is hard, especially I think when tech is involved.
Yeah, I mean, it starts by validating what they said, right? Like, meeting someone where they are of like, oh yeah, I totally hear you. What you just said, XYZ is a problem. Have you thought about X? Or, it starts very soft like that, I think, of, helping people see it in a way or approach it. Because, I mean, just my I'm not a sledgehammer. I don't tend to really hit people over the head with things, but I think it's opening people up to what might be possible by starting from where they are, and just that like crisp nugget of like, hey, have you thought about X? It usually helps them springboard into what's possible.
That's cool. Have you seen by chance, there's this, it's really old, but there was a TED Talk do you know who Guy Kawasaki is? He was a early evangelist for Apple. Yeah. He's got this really interesting talk where a part of it was talking about the evolution of ice companies, where he said, like, ice 1.0 was you go and you cut it out of the lake, right? Like that's ice 1.0. And then somewhere along the line, ice 2.0 is ice factory, right? And then ice 3.0 is the refrigerator. And when you think about the evolution of that industry, which is just ice, none of the ice 1.0 companies became ice 2.0 companies, and none of the 2.0s became 3.0 companies. And so trying to think about innovation or your relationship to technology, and almost like the growth is going to happen on the next curve, and trying to get people educated and prepared for that. I feel like that's some of what you're doing.
Yeah, in some ways it is. And it's, being a small or mid-sized consulting group or service provider, there is this world of opportunity. And I think a lot of people, when you're in services, you're not necessarily thinking about products. And yet it's one of the best ways to grow, or by turning something into an asset or a repeatable framework, things like that. It doesn't necessarily, you almost have to be outside to see in. And yet it frees you up to do things in that way. And, I think a lot of people, as I'm finding, kind of, there's a stage you get to where you're comfortable. You've been doing it for a period of time. You've got great clients. Things are really working. And yet you probably started that business or went out on your own because of this sense of like, I really want to achieve, or I want to do this. I have a pioneering instinct almost. And so you get to this comfort place and you're like, okay, but what is the next horizon? And so I think people, entrepreneurs who have a consulting business, that is kind of the next level for them, is to say, great, I'm either going to add people and keep being exclusively, services, or what are the other things I can do to add to what it is I'm offering to more creatively solve these problems?
I'm totally wired that way. I'm a starter, not a maintainer. I'm always looking for, I think novelty is one of my core drivers, I think. Are you someone that is a workaholic?
I have been. Okay. Yes, definitely.
And when you say you have been, does that mean the curve is flattening, or like what's causing that change in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've really been consciously trying to shift that relationship, because I think, it ebbs and flows. And certainly in my 20s and a lot of my 30s, like definitely workaholic, hid there, was so devoted and poured myself into it. And now it's, okay, how do I have a much more healthy relationship to it? Because I think it's also been a matter of questioning those motivators and drivers. And I would say, fear and wanting to prove myself and some of those more shadow motivators were what made me pour myself into it, and passion and really caring a lot. But there was a more shadowy side to that. And now it's like, right, but what happens and what could the potential be if I'm coming from a place that is much more like, this is the contribution, and I'm being much more actionable or intentional about what it is I want to create, instead of reactive to what opportunities come my way.
Do you think that, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, which is, if you didn't do that in your 20s and 30s, do you think you'd be as well positioned professionally, economically as you are? I mean, do you think that was like, if you could go back now and be like, maybe you shouldn't hustle so hard, do you think the outcome is the same, or do you think that, was it worth it?
Yeah, I mean,
you're still in process, but
yeah, it's hard to say, obviously, but I mean, I don't know. I think there are certainly people that I look at and I'm like, oh, you didn't sort of like hit so many brick walls, or you were kinder to yourself along the way, or had better boundaries about hours. And they've certainly achieved really great things. And, like you probably, I think I always had this sort of like fear of limiting myself. And so I chose smaller companies where it wasn't like a very prescribed ladder and things like that, where like I didn't want my potential capped. And that too was sort of a fear. And so, no, I don't know. I mean, I obviously wouldn't be where I am without all of those things, but yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that I was wired that way and that I did that, because it's led me to where I am and learned a lot of lessons.
It's worked out so far, right?
Yeah. And I think a part of, growing up professionally is, how do I shift this relationship? Like, just because I've always done it this way, or I've always had this relationship to it, should I not question that and challenge it a little bit?
Right. Is it a healthy relationship, or is it an unhealthy relationship? Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at like rehashing some of my old like favorite podcast episodes that I've done over the years. And I was listening to one that I did with a musician that I really respect, Ryan Montbleu. And he was we were kind of talking about the road grind, and I can't remember who told him this, but he's, are you a musician at all? You're not a musician,
no.
Right? But you know what the rest symbol is in music, right? So he said, if you look at the rest symbol in music, it's not an absence of something, it's something that you do. And like that really hit home with me, where it's like, oh yeah, like rest and recharge, like it's an active thing. It's not the absence of something, it is a ingredient in the whole piece. And I've tried to rewire my brain to think a little bit more that way. It makes a lot more sense for me.
Yeah, so. No, I love that it's a part of it. It's not the absence of it. It's just as important.
When you did a book
I did.
This year, Profressionaling Is Hard. And I think let's talk about professionaling for a little bit. First of all, I love the verb. Yeah. It's also the name of your podcast, Profressionaling. And how, it's a short book that is kind of like I don't know how many, is it 20 something, they're tenets, right? Of like how to professional well. And, that's something that I meet a lot of young people. I speak to a lot of young people, and there is tension within professionaling because people want to or expect to. Sometimes I feel like the when we think about careers, it's in some ways the same way that we've started to position relationships, where it's like you need to be able to bring your whole self to this, and it's got to be your work family, and like it's got to give you fulfillment and passion. Like I don't know, does it? When you think about professionaling, how do you help people determine what their relationship with work could or should be when they're starting out their career?
Yeah, I mean, it is its own journey and process, and I think it is about being more kind to yourself. And yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I think depending on the stage of life, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, there is like this pressure now that it has to be the thing that gives you meaning and purpose. And it's like, actually, no, your life and how you show up across the board is really like where you derive a lot of those things. And I think for someone starting out, this was really just for me, like there were so many times that I would be sitting in a meeting or watch someone do something and be like, oh, that is genius. Why didn't someone tell me that that's okay? Like you can say, I don't know. And that builds trust, and you can come back to them and they trust you even more because now when you do say you know something. So it was simple things like that to me, like I just want it to be something you can pick up and flip through and say like, oh, I'm having a hard day, or I'm in this challenging situation. What is something that I could think about? Or just even knowing someone else has been there before.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was just like, how can I give all that empathy and wisdom that I wish, that I've picked up over the last 25 years and give that to someone starting out so that, maybe it is a little easier.
What are some of the ones that do you revisit them yourself? Are there questions or things that you go back to and you're like, man, I got to keep telling myself to, be confident in what I know, or, take credit when it's mine,
Totally. And it's funny, how after writing it, I hear things other places and I'm like, yes, this is a lesson. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to know everything. I think it's so easy to all of a sudden still find myself feeling like, oh, wait, I have to know all the answers before or I need to be ready to. And that is all about mindset. And I've definitely shifted even since writing that of like, no, ready is a very strong word, but saying, am I willing to? And so it's just this shift. And I feel like that's a lot of what I want that to be is like, can you pick this up and look at it from a different angle?
Go deeper on that. Ready versus I'm willing to. Can you give me like an example of that, of where you're deploying that?
Yeah, I mean, reaching out to a big potential client to say like, you know what, maybe I don't feel ready because I haven't done X, Y, or Z, or I haven't worked with someone who does exactly that. But I might not feel ready, but am I willing to reach out to them? Like, what's the worst thing that happens? Well, yeah, I'm willing to. It doesn't, and there is a subtle difference in willing to versus ready. I may never feel ready.
Yeah.
But am I willing to put myself out there? Yeah, I'm willing to put myself out there.
That's really interesting. I love that. One of the things that I experienced totally that you frame it in a little bit different way in the book, which is being confident in what you know. I read that and I go, oh, imposter syndrome. And when you're a single consultant for consultants or working in your industry, how do you psych yourself up to I've been doing this role here at my main role at Think for, almost like 9 years. I was telling a group the other day where I just feel like every 3 to 6 months, someone's going to kick the door down and be like, this is all wrong. Like you've screwed this whole thing up, even after all this time. And what do you do to kind of keep yourself psyched up to understand like, no, I'm a professional, professionaling. And here's why I'm supposed to be here, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is all about professionaling, right? Like, and the one thing that, I even say it in there, like you can't necessarily substitute or fake experience. And that is something that just comes in time, right? Like it is that subtle art of being able to read a situation and say, you know what, and have the confidence to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I know how to figure that out. And being confident enough to say, this is where I'm an expert. And you know what? That's a little bit outside, but I know someone, or I can do that. So that it gives you that credibility. And also just, standing on 2 feet in that room and being like, no, I earned this. I wouldn't be in this room if I hadn't earned it. If they didn't see something in me that thought that I was capable or credible to be able to help them with this. And I trust myself that if I'm out of my depth, I'm scrappy enough to figure it out, or I'm scrappy enough to own it and find someone who can help me figure it out. And so it's that I earned this seat at the table, and I know myself well enough that I know I can figure it out. And it's that trust that I will, whether that's learning it myself, finding how, or whatever that is.
Yeah, I've found a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but an unreasonable amount is that I can just Google faster than you can, or I can find that answer really quickly.
Well, and the depth that you need the answer. I think that's another thing that comes with experience is like having worked in the biopharma industry. I am not a biologist. I don't have a science degree. And so it was, how can I learn enough? How can I intimately understand a business problem? And then how do I educate myself enough that I can understand what it is we're talking about from a science perspective so I can have those conversations with experts and not look like an idiot. But I also don't spend so much excessive time putting so much pressure on myself to learn something that is just beyond what's reasonable for me. When
you were thinking about, getting into the kind of that intersection of business and health, and then biotech, like I'm just using biotech as a general large industry term. In some ways, like you're kind of riding a wave, or you're having to plan for a career that didn't exist yet, right? And that's I was with a group of students the other day, and there's a lot of pressure. Like, what are you going to study? What do you want to do after school? And I think about my own career trajectory, where it's like, small city business incubator director. Like, that's not a thing. That wasn't a thing.
Yep.
When I got out of school. I'm on career 7 now, I think, by my count. And so how do you think about, or if you're giving advice to young people to develop a skill set or an appetite to position themselves for something that might not exist yet?
Yeah, I mean, it is funny. I talked about that with my nephew not long ago, who's a freshman in college. And I was like, the job that you're going to have even 4 years from now probably doesn't even exist yet.
Right.
So I think it is just, like on the one side, yes, follow your passion, your interest. Like, what just naturally comes to you where you're like, I get it, this, and I'm interested, and I can lose some track of time because that's definitely going to hold your attention better. And then there is this part of it that it's like, how do I stay open? Like, I don't personally feel that being rigid or clinging to like, this is the specific thing that I want. Well, what do you know what you're missing out on? Like, look around. And so there's one part follow that, and one part stay open to what could be and curious about that. And, don't put so much pressure on the, like, it's got to be one thing, and yet you do have to pay the bills. So
yeah, that's the tension, right? I mean, that's the tension. I think I studied business. I just did an undergrad in business administration. Like, how general can one be? And then, but I contrast that with like, man, if I did, I'm not putting down anyone in health or medical, but boy, if I did med school, I'm going to be a doctor or a nurse practitioner or something, like, because I have $500,000 of debt that I need to take care of. And so thinking, I was just kind of like, well, I can apply this across a broad spectrum of potential careers,
Yeah, I mean, and in doing my master's in public health, like, it was shocking. There were a few MDs who were in the program and sort of left, the medical profession and came to get that. And a big part of that program is the financial piece of it, or the business side of it. And there were tears in their eyes because these physicians were like, no one ever told us this. How could no one ever explain the business side of this? And the reality of our healthcare system is that is a big part of it, right?
What do you mean no one ever told us what? Like how the sausage is made? I mean,
as far as the business side of healthcare, yeah. I mean, they're with good reason totally focused on the medical and how to save people's lives. But then to realize, but this is a business. I think it was very like humbling and a little jarring to them to be like, oh wait, this is how this works. Why? It feels irresponsible that no one talked to us about this side of it. So it's probably my own bias, but I do think having some understanding of basic business concepts and how the world works, as far as like,
for better or worse.
Yeah,
right?
for better or worse, this is a capitalist society and we're here. So if you understand some piece of that and how you can put your own touch on it, or how you can find your own way of being in that, is powerful.
Shifting gears a little bit, we've kind of interfaced over the last few years just on different ideas, and I feel like, I just enjoy. We just brainstorm a lot. I feel like I get a lot out of the conversations that we've had. I don't know if there's been meaningful movement in your business, but I get a lot out of it. So there's some value extraction here. But one of the things that when we were talking the other day is you're like, oh, I'm in Florida. I'm like, well, obviously I know why you might want to be in Florida in March or April outside of New York State. But it strikes me that you said you've been doing this for a while. How have you intentionally created a career path, a business that allows you to do that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you were very generous with your wisdom. Thank you for that when we have our ideation sessions. But no, I was thinking about it the other day. Since I think 2007, off and on, have been working remotely. And whether that's like I have a team in office somewhere and I go there for a week, a month, whatever that's looked like. But I've been doing that since then. And a part of it, I had been living here back then, and I wanted to be, closer to Boston and make that move. And I think within me, there's sort of this tension that's always existed of, I am from here and I love it here. And I would love to have an impact in some way, shape, or form to the community that I'm from, where my family is. And yet there's this part of me that also wants to be out in the world and exploring and meeting new people and seeing new things. And so I think I've always kind of been deeply committed to, both that freedom for myself to be out in the world and doing things I love, and yet I am a workaholic in some ways. And so it's like, I trust myself that I'm going to get it done no matter where I am. So how can I creatively put myself in a situation to do that?
But here's what I like about your approach is that it's not an or, it's an and.
Totally.
I'll work with people like, I'm moving down to Florida. Like, I love it here, but moving down to Florida because of the weather. I'm like, well, why can't it be an and? Like, why can't you do what you do, where it's Florida or it's Boston or it's upstate New York or it's Singapore or it's whatever, right? There's a point where you had to go, I can have all of this, and I just have to build the mechanics around it, So if we go tactical, what are some of the things that you do as a consultant or a business owner that allow you to do that? Because there's got to be, I'm sure there are some clients that have certain expectations of how the relationship is going to work, but how do you set the expectations that are in alignment with the lifestyle that you want to lead?
Yeah, I mean, I love being on site with someone, and some clients don't want you, and that's totally okay. But I think, a lot of it is also you meet people or through relationships. And so some of that over the last 25 years has been, I have met them in person. And as much as, yes, I love being remote and all those things, I am also a huge believer in being on site and having that in-person time as much as you can within reason. But, because it builds that trust. Like, there is just something that happens when you get in a room with someone.
Totally.
Or the group or the team or whatever that is. You learn dynamics you didn't necessarily. So I think it's that because it establishes that connection and trust both directions, so that, when things inevitably come up, there is a little bit more like, oh, we have all of this to work from that is established between us, that trust, that respect between one another.
You're not just a face on a screen.
Yeah. And even in the absence of that, I think it's just being very, very in tune to what's going on. And I'm also a huge proponent of over-communicate. And when I say over-communicate, I'm not saying you write a book. I'm saying be crisp, be concise, but don't let them question what you're doing or what's happening. They should never ask you. They should always be able to know, like, oh, she sent me a quick update the other day, or, oh, I know she's working on that. Because if they're questioning that, like, that does start to chip away. And so especially if you're not in an office with someone, I think across the board, it's just, how can I make sure that there are no questions?
So how do you then build a routine or systems around that? Because that to me is very hard. For someone like me, that's very hard to do. What are the tools that you use, or do you wake up at the end of every day, you're like, I'm doing a readout of what I did today? What do you actually do?
Yeah, I mean, I love being the more creative ideation person, but what's enabled me to have that freedom almost is having structures and systems and processes. So it is, and it depends, but yeah, I mean, it's just depending on the client, the situation, whatever it is, like what's the right fit for that, and who is the client? Like, are they someone who's like, you know what, once a week, cool?
Yeah.
Or someone who is a little bit more like, this is high stakes and I'm nervous about it. I need to be communicating. So whatever that is, it's kind of reading the situation and making sure for myself that I'm proactively meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let me ask you this: when you're remote, are you going to places where you want to visit, or are you going to places where you have your people already? Or, I mean, one of the things that I follow a lot of remote work folks, whether it's blogs, newsletters, Instagram, and it looks so awesome. And yet it's almost like clockwork. There comes to a point where like this adventure peaks, and then there's this long post about how lonely they are. And, for people that are digital nomads or solopreneurs, how do you break out of that where, I mean, you're a very personable person. How do you build a network in places where you don't have a route?
Yeah, I mean, you got to have your people. Yeah. And that's such a huge part of it. And I'm so lucky that I have created this great network of other professionals who either have their own consulting group or they're in this, or just people I've met along the way. And I think it is being aware of that, of like just doing regular check-ins with people. And I'm super lucky that some of the people that I've worked with along the way are now my friends. So we're checking in anyway and just kind of naturally talk about the work things. Cool. But you got to have your people. Yeah. I mean, it's such a big part of it. And, for them and for me, so much of it is we usually know the answers to things. It's just hearing ourselves say things out loud and to other people that it's like, oh, there's the aha. I just needed to talk to Ryan quick. And,
oh, man, that's how I've built a career. So I don't have the answer. You do. My job is just to try to ask the questions to draw it out of you. Yeah. So very cool. The last thing I want to just ask you about, because I want to be very respectful of your time, is the book. You're like, so I guess it's a multi-part question. Why a book and not a YouTube channel and not another medium? And I guess to piggyback on that, not just why a book, publishing a book has traditionally been intimidating, all right? And so you self-published it, right?
I did.
Can you talk a little bit about the process and you're like, I want to write a book, so I'm writing a book. A lot of people get caught up on the how and not just this is what I'm going to do. So
a book, because I have always loved books, is that thing when you're like, oh, think back to what you liked to do when you were a kid. And I'm like, I loved bookstores. I loved writing. I loved making stories. Our mom used to take us and we'd get those old like wallpaper books that were sticky.
Oh, yeah.
And I would put them on cardboard and make books. And it was like, I loved it. I loved books. I loved getting new books, being at the library. And I think that's a part of myself, like the more writer, creative self got buried by the I need to do businessy things part of me. And I some of the ideas I've talked to you in the past, like I've had so many ideas for businesses or nonprofits or different things that I've wanted to pursue, and I've never taken any of them all the way. And I think coming out of my last role, I was like, I just really need to see a creative project all the way through for myself, just to prove that I can do it. And I do love writing, and I'm very lucky that on the how-to and not getting caught up on it, through friends and other people, I learned about this course called like the Tiny Book Course.
Oh, cool.
And so it's remote, but like you can do remote working sessions. It was just enough for me structure and how to do it on my own. And yet I wasn't alone in doing it, that the how-to kind of solved itself.
Okay.
And they are also very good about empowering you to say like, a tiny book could be 10 questions to ask your daughter before she goes to school. And I thought I was
a series of blog posts, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And to me, this just was like, someone's son was starting his first big job, and he was putting all this pressure on himself. And I was like, oh my God, I remember that. I remember feeling like I needed to know everything. And I went to my phone because I am a list person, or I like to track things. And I had this list of professional lessons. And I'm like, why did someone not tell me this sooner? And I'm like, oh, there's my book. I just sat down one afternoon and started writing. And like 4 hours later, I'm like, oh, yeah, this
can work.
It. Yeah.
Were you doing the program, is it asynchronous, or is it like self-paced, or did you have other people that were kind of keeping you on track?
There was a little bit of a structure, like a start date, end date, and meetings in the middle, or co-working, cool. Just turn your Zoom on.
Just so we're doing a thing.
Yeah, that it was, again, just as much. And, you didn't have to stay on that schedule. And it was pretty loose. I mean, I made my own. Again, I'm better with structure. So I'm like, all right, for me, what's realistic here? So,
that's awesome. Very cool. How long did it take you to go from like, I'm going to do a book to I'm holding the book in my hand?
Honestly, it was like 3.5 months.
That's
4 months.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And self-published through, can I ask like who you self-published through?
So I ended up doing it. There's sort of an independent that goes to all the bookstores everywhere, which was a little bit harder, admittedly. And then Amazon or like Kindle publishing was really easy.
And so that's what you did, was Kindle publishing?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. So it was on Amazon, and
awesome.
Yeah. It was honest. It really wasn't that hard. It's one of those things where like, maybe you screw up a couple times, but then you figure it out. And it's like, oh, I wish I had known it was this not so very complicated. Very
cool. So if people want to know more about you or connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, I have a website, Kristin Fahy, and that's probably the best, easiest place to find me. Or as you said, I'm Profressionaling Better on Instagram. So,
Professionally Better, cool. Professionally, just all one word, professionally better?
Profressionaling.
Professionaling.
Yes.
Awesome. And the book is Profressionaling Is Hard. You've got the podcast, Profressionaling.
Yes.
And I don't know, anything else that I'm missing?
I don't think so, no. Just thank you. I mean, you
are
so generous, and I know this is your job, and I'm always fascinated how you were able to make this your job, which I'm sure people will ask you all the time. But you were very generous with your big brain and how you help people and motivate people and champion them. So thank you.
I appreciate it. All right. That sounds great. Again, I want to thank Kristin for coming on the show. You can check out her book, Profressionaling Is Hard, on Amazon, or you can get more information about her, connect with her at her website, KristinFahy.com. That's Kristin, Kristin, Fahy, Fahy.com. And thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.